Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kaufman. Stephen and I are here with the man, the myth, the legend. Really no introduction needed. Doug Smith, who's part of the Yellowstone Wolf, Cougar, and Bird Project, I believe, right? Doug, was it? Or Wolf, Elk, and Bird?
Well, I used to supervise the Wolf, Bird, and Elk program, I used to supervise Dan Taylor, who ran the Cougar program, and he really did all the work, but because I was his boss, I'd get blamed for the bad stuff, and he'd get credit for the good stuff.
Oh, my God. But for 28 years, I think my first initial question for you is, how's retirement so far?
Not going like I thought. I was worried about, filling all the time and the void, and it's turning out to be different location and different pay, but just as much busyness. There are some things I miss terribly, too. I did what I did because I loved it and I was passionate about it. And so that's a huge void in my life. I miss the flights, seeing the park in its kind of pristine form, especially in a wet spring like this. There are some aspects I don't miss at all, and I'll leave out specifically what those are. I think you can guess. Yeah. So it's a mixed bag. I don't talk about this much, but part of the reason for the retirement was I needed a better work-life balance. And I think that's been nice. And, I won't be explicit about this, but I'm still doing a lot of wolf stuff. I went to a Worldwide Wolf Conference in Sweden. I'm working on a review of the Mexican wolf program. I'm doing some writing. I'm doing some speaking. So it's still filling my time. Wolves are healthily. I'm doing more birding, which I enjoy too. So retirement, I'm still trying it on.
So why, Doug? Why continue even after retirement to put so much effort and so much of your time into this topic? What does it mean to you to keep doing it when you don't have to?
Well, this is a corny and sappy answer, but because this didn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. I have been interested in wolves since I was a small boy. Everybody associates me with Yellowstone wolves. But I have been studying wolves. My official wolf job was 1979. So that was 44 years ago. I just spent the last 28 in Yellowstone. So for me, this wasn't confined by any kind of structure at all or a job. Wolves are a need. Wolves are a critter that cries out for, this, for lack of a better word, help, because they're connected to nature. And nature really is, I would like to think, my persona, my soul, my anchor in life. And that came to me very early in life. And so to me, the structures of the federal government and Yellowstone National Park was just one phase. And that ended, and I'm still all in on wolves. And this will sound a little bad, but, I've spent a lot of time working, thinking, trying to help wolves, trying to understand them. And I have gotten to a certain point in life. I, in some ways, don't believe this because, humility, I think, is the most important thing in the world. But I have a certain amount of cachet. I want to use that to help wolves. Yeah. So if I can swagger and it helps wolves, not to help me or to get my name out there, but if I can throw my weight around profitably, case in point, and this was tough because I don't like being a big voice. Diane Boyd and I just wrote an op-ed for the Bozeman Chronicle about how Montana counts wolves. And, it's a really hard thing. I respect their effort on how to try and do it, but they need to improve their method. They need to come up with a better way to estimate wolves so they can make better decisions. So those are the kinds of things speaking out about that I will consider very carefully moving forward, as well as continuing to write other things about wolves.
I want to ask you about the human aspect really quick, because we've interviewed a lot of the individuals who were under your supervision at the time. So Kiera Cassidy, Jeremy Sundaraj, those. What is it like for you to lead those individuals now to the point where they are now in terms of the way they do their research, how they're doing the work that you started here in the park and carrying on that wolf legacy in a way so that this information continues to get out to the public.
Well, when you mention those two folks who have done podcasts for you guys before, the first word that comes to mind for me is inspirational. I mean, I was inspired by Kira and Jeremy, and that, as much as the wolves, as much as the park, as much as the love of nature, I loved that aspect of the work is, I guess I shouldn't refer to it this way, this isn't politically correct, but bringing in people younger than me and trying to help them. And then when they come to a certain point or position in their career, they blossom, they surpass me, they do better, and then my job is to just let them go. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because both those people you mentioned have certain things that they have done better than me and where it's kind of their niches, and you just don't touch that. You just let that develop and leave that alone. And I think I thought a lot about leadership my whole career. What kind of leader am I? At some point, a leader needs to let go, step aside and let their ideas and their creativities and their strengths take over, and you just flat get out of the way. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's really hard because old guys like me like to sit there forever and kind of just, be in charge. But that's full of ego and hubris, and I didn't want to do that. Let stronger, younger, both minds and bodies, take over. And so to me, and I've seen what they've done in the brief time I've been out of there, they're wonderful and it's inspirational. And there's a whole bunch of other crew too. Matt's is there doing great things. Jack Raby, Taylor Raby, Nikki Tatton, it is strong. Yeah. And although it was hard to leave because I loved them all, now they're taking over. And I've already mentioned Dan Staler. He gave a talk today that was, I was like, geez, holy moly, glad I didn't have to talk after him.
Yeah, if those folks are any example of your leadership, Doug, they're some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And last time we were in Yellowstone, they gave us, they took us to places we'd never think of going, and we saw things that we really did not expect. And man, they're just mind-blowing people. Really inspiring to me, actually, at the beginning of our podcast time, at the era of the beginning of this podcast. Just meeting those folks here, it really just invigorated me personally to do.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Just more. Just amazing people, man.
They're contagion. It's nice people. To hear that it's expanding out.
I just want to know, you've done all this, you've contributed an unbelievable amount to the sum total of science that we have about this species, and science that we can rely on, science that we can hang our hats on and we can refer to when we have questions. And that's the serious stuff. But there's also been, I love these stories we've heard about you just around a campfire laughing and making jokes with folks, and this grizzly bear story about this grizzly running everyone around a lake and a mistaken drowning, I think, that story. And I just wonder, you're making this transition, I wonder if you think about those kinds of lighter, less serious stories more often. Some might say really serious stories, depends, but if you think about those stories and what those kind of simple moments of being around a fire with these guys and making history, whether you knew it or not, but just do you think about those moments and what do they mean to you now in this transitional period?
I think a lot about those moments, and I have to say that's a unique question. I've been interviewed a lot. I've lost count how many times, and I haven't had a question like that ever before. So I have a ton of ready answers. So I thought this interview was going to be easy.
No, we don't make it easy.
Life's about relationships and experiences. I think you can encapsulate it that way. And so here we have a job to do, wolf science and conservation. You got to bring the rest of life into it. So that means relationships and experiences. And so the levity that Carter and I developed early on allowed us to work better together. It brought down the awkwardness of people being colleagues, and you transition to being friends, and you can let your hair down and talk in any way you could. In terms of my job on the Yellowstone Wolf Project, I loved working with young people. Well, how do you do that? You have to be approachable to them. You have to be open to them, and you have to make it a safe space so they can come in and talk to you about anything they need to talk to you about. And I'm not talking about personal stuff, but so much at work is life stuff that you're trying to do at work. People don't get along in the field. People are uncomfortable doing certain things. You have to have who's going to do what. Of course, everybody wants to fly in the helicopter and handle the wolf. How are you going to work through those things? And you do usually work through them imperfectly, but if you're open and you're talking and the barriers are down, it goes better. And so that's why I would do and Carter and I have the personality that kind of takes it to a humor level, and that's just another way to break down those barriers. So those are the federal government in general is not good at this kind of stuff. Very structured, very linear hierarchy, and you have to live within that. And one of my goals was to fight against that. And then the last key, and I know all of my answers are long, I'm sorry about that, but the federal government, one of their problems was they're so big, and this is true of all bureaucracies, it's just not targeted at the federal government, it becomes impersonal. It becomes, I can't help you because the bureaucracy is so big, we don't have the money, this position's being cut, this position isn't going to be created. What I tried to do, and one of our successes was we raised a lot of outside funds. Non-governmental dollars is what we call them. And so what I tried to do with that money was build in stability. So you can offer someone a job and they can stay there year after year. And the morale goes up, their esprit de corps goes up because you have a foundation to work on. And it's the same people year in and year out. They learn the park, they learn the wolves, they learn your program, and then they can build on that. I've always said to learn wolves, to learn Yellowstone, takes at least 5 years. It took me 20, but I'm a slow learner. But people like Kira and Jeremy and Jack and Dan, very quick studies. Matt's quick studies, but it still took them 5 years. Most people don't stay 5 years, so you have to build in loyalty, you have to build in stability. Hate to say it because this is how the world works and I don't like it, money. It takes money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's one of the successes of the Yellowstone Wolf Project during my tenure was I started off fully funded by the government and they started budget cuts and we'd make up the difference, $10,000 first. And then they're like, oh, wow, he made that up right away. And now we have to make up 60% of the budget.
Wow.
Or they do. I'm not there doing it anymore. Man. But that was the key. So you built in stability, which builds in passion and knowledge. And, Kira, she came here first, I think, in 2008. Matt came in 2002. Dan came in 1997. So you build that in. That's why Dan gave this Cracker Jack talk this morning, because he's been thinking about this a lot. And Dan's going to laugh at this if you listen to the podcast. My guess is he won't. He couldn't have given a talk like that in 2000.
And the stability puts you at ease enough to relax into it and to focus.
Yes, it puts me at ease enough. And what it does for me, and I had to think through this. It was a soul-searching experience. Be egoless enough to say, it's time to get out of the way. You know what I mean? It's time to get out of the way. And besides wolves, I'm going to focus on other things in life.
Yeah. We want to be cognizant of your time because we know you're speaking tonight. Okay. Oh, we got the finger. Okay. Doug, just encapsulate. I've asked this to everybody that we've talked to today because there are a lot of people that can't be here at the Wolf Summit. For those that aren't here, what does it mean for this collection of individuals? We've had a lot of Native voices come through. We have advocacy. We've had, statewide, Dan Staller, Ken Mills, a lot of people from all different facets. For you, what does that look like to see this gathering of folks to discuss really rational and being the problem solvers of how to move forward with conservation and coexistence, not only with wolves especially, but we're talking grizzly bears and all these other predators that are coming down the pike too.
Again, I'm going to refer back to, having done like 2,000 interviews and I thought I'd heard every question. And that's the second question in this interview I haven't heard. So it's really hard to answer that, but I'll try and make this answer shorter. But, these are bad times for conservation, for the environment. The future doesn't look great. And I think gatherings like this, the biggest question is what now? What do you do? Because, science is on the decline. Not in terms of the accumulation of knowledge, that's to me the definition of science, but the use of science is on the decline. There's actually a lot of good science being done, but it's being ignored.
Yeah.
people just don't pay attention to it. It comes down to something I've always said plagues wolves. I think I know how the world works, and that's not based on any data at all. Or this is how I want the world to work, and that's how I'm going to make policy. Yeah. And we're experiencing that more than ever now. So a gathering like this is kind of a collective gathering of people to say, let's take a breath. What's an effective way forward? How are we going to combat this decline in the use of what we know, and acknowledge that we're suffering in environmental decline and a biodiversity crisis? And so, my strategy for this, and so I really didn't know what to expect. I'm friends with the organizers, and we have kind of a backslapping relationship, but when you get serious, it's like, what's this going to do? And I think what this has done is there's been a lot of different voices, and that's what's missing a lot too. It's a gathering to compare things. One thing I'm going to say tonight, but a lot of people have said it already, is I'm kind of a radical and an ideologue, but I know that's not going to work, because we're so far to one side that to get it back to the other direction of rationality, we've got to take baby steps and we've got to be moderate. So that means what you propose, you want to be reasonable. Diane and my essays, I don't want to keep bringing that up. I'm not trying to self-promote, but what we said that FWP is doing some good things. I mean, both of us know a lot of the people who work for the agency. You don't want to call friends, you're doing a bad job. You want to say, hey, I know you're revising your wolf management plan. Here's something that we think's important. We hope you'll listen. We hope you'll take notice. It's not, you're doing a terrible job, blah, 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 you're awful, you're evil. No, it's a hard job to manage wolves in a human-dominated landscape. People used to accuse me of managing wolves in a country club because it's a national park. You don't have to suffer the problems of dealing with wolves on a human-dominated landscape. Right. I know that's hard. Mm-hmm. Don't throw stones, throw pebbles for them to look at. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that message of moderation, I think this conference is actually, it's coalescing here. Yeah. Because they're saying talk to people. The number one message coming out of this conference, and I hate it because I'm speaking late in it, and I was going to say the same thing, is show up. Yeah. Show up. Yeah. And that's a good message, because even if you show up and don't get what you want, it's in the other people's backs of their minds, we're not getting away with this. Yeah. And I actually think some of the things this conference is doing and Wolves of the Rockies is doing and this op-ed we wrote is doing is it's not going to change things in the short term. Yeah. Oh, no way. There's two things you do when you are criticized. You change your mind or you dig in. Yeah. And most people now dig in. Right. And so I fully expect FWP to dig in on what Diane and I said. Yeah. But what we did, and this is one of the main reasons we wrote it, where there's now a public documentation that your method of counting wolves needs improvement. Yeah. You should work on it. So we're hoping to set up for the long run. And I don't know what that is, 2-3 years, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. But what we're doing is right now we know everyone's going to blow us off and dig in. But you still can't sit there and say, well, I'm not going to do anything. You want to point out and say, you need to stop having your population estimator as a distribution estimate. That's what the IPOM does. Right. It estimates distribution, not abundance. That sounds like a simple problem. It's not, but it's a simple question. Yeah. I mean, I have just one last one. Do you have? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of different voices, when you were in your career, this dense long career, how were Native voices considered, or were you allowed to consider them based on your government employee status? Were you allowed to consider Native voices, or how were they considered in your research? Because I found it really interesting. Tyson, he was talking about this dynamic of elk, wolf parasites, and this bison dynamic, and I've never heard that before, and I wonder if that had been studied, or if those types of native originated ideas were considered during your time. Oh, yeah. I mean, so I view your question as kind of two parts, and I'll answer the first part, which is I kind of have a love affair with northern Canada, because that's truly remote up there. I mean, it's way more remote than Yellowstone. I mean, I know a lot of Americans think Yellowstone's pristine, and it's semi-pristine, but it's suffered all kinds of insults over its 150-year history. You go to northern Canada, there's places that have hardly seen a human, and so I've done over 20 canoe trips in northern Canada, and a lot of those trips I've met indigenous people, Aboriginals, and so I wouldn't say I'm best friends or I'm buddies with them, but I've spent time in their communities, I've spent time with them, and so they have infiltrated my kind of philosophy that I had in Yellowstone informally. It would have been very difficult for me to bring them in formally because it has to go through all layers of government approval. Yeah. And so that's going to be super hard. So they infiltrated me through kind of my belief system. And what Tyson was talking about today, and what's very important, is there are numerous ways of knowing. And the oral history and the witnessing of their 14,000-year history is one way of knowing. And then there's the Western science way of knowing, putting radio collars on and following wolves around. And which is better is a value judgment. But when those two things mesh, it can be very powerful, because we all know knowledge, it comes from making a proposal, being wrong, revising your proposal, making it better, and continuing on. And so I used to work in Yellowstone National Park, where the hydatid tapeworm cyst has been intensively studied. And the Western science approach was similar to his story, but not the same. For one, our world doesn't have bison. Right. And this kind of cleansing value of bison hasn't been documented, but what wolves do to hydatid tapeworm on Isle Royale is they tend to cull the moose that have it. Because as Tyson said, it fills their lungs with these cysts. Wow. So you have less functional lung material. So when wolves are chasing you, you can't run as fast. They spot that, they kill you. It's done, yeah. So it's a slightly different story. And if I enter his story correctly, the buffalo were the missing, cleansing, purifying. He actually said purifying. I'm sorry, I got that wrong, Tyson. But purifying, and we need the buffalo back to help with this elk-wolf relationship. On Isle Royale, it's more of a culling relationship that the wolves discover about the moose, and they're able to kill those moose, so they minimize the prevalence of the disease. They haven't eliminated it. And what happens is the moose has the cyst, the wolves eat the cyst, they get the tapeworm in their intestinal tract. The tapeworm lives in their intestinal tract. They defecate the eggs out in their feces, and the moose pick up the eggs by eating the vegetation and drinking the water, and then it lands in all of their soft organ tissue. He just mentioned lungs, but it can be in their liver, it can be in their lungs, it can be in their kidney, all those different things. And so he was on the money. And Isle Royale Western Science was on the money.
Wow.
Different though. And so how we advance is we sit down and go through those things. And a big point that Tyson had was no one's listening to us, Yeah. And this is a pervasive problem through all northern communities. And it's that kind of, I loved his story about data. I mean, my eyes popped out. Yeah. Because, you have to filter all your water on Isle Royale so you don't get hydatid tapeworm cyst. Yeah. So this is near home, and to hear his story and then to look at what they did, John Fusicic interviewed, Rolf Peterson, they're behind that story, and to hear the comparison was really kind of cool. Yeah, it was native oral history with Western science combined. That's the way forward.
Yeah, and I can't agree with it more, and we've heard that, and Carter has said this to me a couple times already. He's like, this conference has been incredible for him because of the merging of voices and the different types of attitudes that are coming to the table in this specific setting. And he has spoken nothing but highly about what Wolves of the Rockies put together. So it's huge to hear that from you too. I want to go back in time for just a minute. Did you, at the time when wolves were coming back to Yellowstone, envision or imagine at any point it was going to have the effect that it has?
Do you mean ecologically?
Ecologically, I think ecologically, but I think socially, how much it has evolved over time, but ecologically first.
When I came to Yellowstone, I was 34 years old, and I was pretty naive. I had my head down, and I kept to my lane. Mm-hmm. And, I wasn't given really strict walking orders. The first was reintroduce wolves. Get them to take, and that's a very amorphous, wide open, job description. But that's what it was. So the building of this program, that wasn't really part of it. And I was thinking 100%, I'm a nature lover, a bunny hugger, whatever you want to call me, but I try and think that I'm a middle of the road person. But this to me was all about restoring the wild. It was an ecological project. Wolves are the dominant carnivore in North America, all due respect to cougars, but they're not everywhere originally. They were restricted pretty much to the Rocky Mountain chain, and, I'm talking North America. They go all the way down into South America, but, they were a western mountainous critter. Wolves are everywhere. Mountains, plains, deciduous forests, tundra, where cougars aren't, And so to me, this was restoring nature the way it should be, and you got to have wolves back, head down. I had no idea how big a deal Yellowstone was. I mean, to me, and this is going to probably come back to haunt me, it's just another park, Yeah. And what I went on to learn, it's the mother park worldwide, and I grew to wear that as I was proud about that.
Yeah.
This is the mother park. It truly is. Ken Burns said it in his special, America's Best Idea. Look at the ideas floating around America now. I mean, that's we're in the toilet right now, and this is America's best idea. And so this is one of the few places in the lower 48, not Canada, Alaska, that's never been log mined or grazed.
Wow.
It's one of a handful. There's hardly any place like that, and it's big. So you have size plus semi-pristine. And so what I came in to do the right thing for wolves and restore nature. And what evolved to me over time, to answer your question, right, was this is a platform that you can use to speak on. And I had to overcome my Midwestern upbringing roots of self-promotion is awful to say, I'm going to use the stage Yellowstone has given us, and wolves too.
Yeah.
And so you combine wolves and Yellowstone, and it's frickin' headline above the fold news every day of the week. Yeah. And so it was a deliberate strategy, especially the last 10 years of my career. And Kira Cassidy's taken over on this in a better way than I did. You want to keep that going. Yeah. It's called science communication. It's called positive news about wolves, and it's always negative news about wolves.
Yeah.
And you want to self-promote that and get that word out there. And I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that was going to happen because I was head down, purist, ecology, restore wolves. The other side of this, I really ethically had a big problem with humans wanting to completely exterminate from the face of the earth a species. And that was the goal for wolves.
Just in general.
Starting in Europe and then in North America. The goal wasn't just, control them and knock them back and solve the problems. It was wipe them off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And so when I was a small boy, that was the first thing I thought about. And I was like, that is ethically, morally wrong.
Yeah.
And so bringing them back to me was kind of a life thing as much as it was a job, But then the stage appeared and they pulled the curtain back and I was like, darn, there's no one standing on it,
That's what we were saying in the last interview was, it's like you don't get a lot of chances in life to correct mistakes that big. Just
no,
and now
you don't get second chances very much.
We have a chance to do it, and
the other thing about wolves though is they just need half a chance.
100%.
I mean, they really are tough.
Yeah,
they're really adaptable. They're plastic behavior.
Really, they are.
They're generalists, not specialists. The ferret, the black-footed ferret reintroduction.
Yep.
They're specialists. They eat prairie dogs, and that's it. You can't dump that out in the landscape and have them go find a place to live. I mean, wolves, you can dump them out anywhere, and they'll be fine. Yeah. It's just that no one gives them a chance.
Yeah.
And it truly is a human takeover of the world. Joanna Lambert's talked a couple times really well about that. The human takeover of the world is well advanced.
Yeah.
And wolves, actually, given half a chance, can function within that. And how they will function is they'll keep the bits and pieces that's left.
Right.
whole and better and semi-pristine. No pristineness is left because of climate change, but wolves can be one of those small things that can step in and make wild nature survive amidst this takeover. And I think that's a very important message of why we have to search for coexistence with them.
Just one rapid fire question. What's Doug Smith's favorite part of the park to visit?
Ooh, those are secrets. I have a favorite river
I knew he was gonna say
that I'm
too.
going to do this summer.
I knew he was gonna say
that
that.
a friend of mine, he just passed away. He's a great guy. He canoed northern Canada his entire life. He had a business called Canoe Arctic. It's transitioned now. He sold it to Jack Pine Paddle. And before he passed away, he told me his single most favorite river in northern Canada. I'm doing it this
secret.
summer. And on his deathbed, he promised me not to tell anybody. So here I am in Yellowstone. I've traveled Yellowstone quite a bit. If I haven't traveled on the ground or by horseback or canoe, I've flown it. And so I wrote about one of these places one time, and a very dear ranger, a friend, he started in Yellowstone in 1952. I asked him to review the article, and the only thing he said about the whole article was, take the reference to where the horse trip was out, because then everybody will go there. So I'll leave it at that.
Are there spots in Yellowstone that have never seen a human being?
I got to guess there are.
Yeah.
Yellowstone, world's first park. I got to think people have been just about everywhere. But this place I'm talking about, I was riding across it with this old ranger near the end of his life. Dear man, Jerry Mernon was his name, probably Yellowstone's greatest ranger in their history. And the description he used riding across this area was haunting. And so you don't feel an emotion like that if lots of people have been there.
No.
And so I don't know the answer to that, but my guess is yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know that feeling
The
too.
thoroughfare region is considered the furthest area from a road in the lower 48.
Yeah.
And that's 32 miles. I think that's pathetic, but we got to take it. We got to take it. The furthest you can get from a road in the continental United States is the southeast corner of Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And so, that suggests that there's places no one's ever been.
Yeah, those places you have that lonely feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so these actually are my last two questions. Okay, so how do you feel about, in a summarized sense, how do you feel about the Colorado reintroduction? Do they have a good chance?
I think they do.
Yeah.
I think for a couple reasons. One is they're not a rural-based state as much as Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. You've got large urban populations, and that's flips the dynamic. I know Joanna Lambert doesn't like that kind of comparison, but I think that brings in a diversity of thought, whereas Idaho, Montana, Wyoming are rurally dominated states, and that's kind of a different paradigm. And so I think what that, in short, means is human attitudes are what's determining the future of nature. It's nature's kind of at a position now, it's what we let it do.
Yeah.
And so I think Colorado has a more diversity of ideas. Secondly, they have a lot of public land. What's hard about it is a lot of it's high elevation public land, which is useless to wolves and elk in the winter, which means they're all going to come down in elevation, and the people live at low elevation.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is going to depend on wild land that doesn't have people in it. And the areas that have that, the combination of remote land, public land that isn't high elevation, we went to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming first for a reason. The blocks of land like that in Colorado are there, but each block is slightly smaller in size.
Yeah.
And wolves are going to do best when you have clusters of packs. They're not going to do it if you have a pack here and a pack there. I realize this is an audio interview. What I'm talking about is packs just sprinkled out broadly.
Yeah.
You're going to need kind of a critical mass of groups of packs in one area. And then, there'll be a lot of inhospitable landscape, either because humans live there or it's bad habitat. And the next small cluster of places that are good for wolves need to be able to be connected. They need to have corridors so you don't have these genetic issues that like Mexican wolves are having and Scandinavian wolves are having, and our royal wolves had too. So that, I think, is the way Colorado's going to look, and so the combination of human attitudes, which is really the future of all wildlife, but a little bit of worry of how this landscape is different than the Northern Rockies. I think it's adequate and it's doable, But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about when I picked you up at the airport, was just how massive some of this area is in between the mountains. But in Colorado, if you drive across it, a lot of times it does make sense, because it just feels like right outside of the road, it just goes straight up, and there's just everything's high elevation where they could be. Otherwise, they're going to be on private land. And elk already spend a lot of time on private land in those areas.
What's interesting about me, and I don't mean to jump in because you're running this, but we wrote this paper this winter. Kira led on it, but it was a big team effort. But it looked at what is the impact of human-caused mortality at wolves that live inside national parks. The mortality is legal mortality that occurs outside. And one thing that human mortality does, when wolves live on a human landscape, their packs are very different than wolves that live in national parks. In other words, wolves generally are multi-generational families. And what that means is the most common way, not the only way, of pack formation is a pair of wolves gets together. They have pups one year. They have pups the next year. They have pups the next year. And so pretty soon you have pups and yearlings and 2-year-olds and maybe even a few 3-year-olds. Most wolves do end up dispersing, but you get these multi-generational packs
families,
with a great deal of experience and knowledge. And they're very stable in the landscape, and they exist there for a long time, and they have culture. Molly's pack started in 1995. They are direct genetic lineage still going. Okay.
Wow.
So what I just said, remember everything I just said for a few seconds. When wolves live on human-dominated landscapes, everything I just said does not happen. There's high pack turnover, because usually not just one wolf's getting killed in the pack, several wolves are getting killed in the pack. So different things happen. Like Dan mentioned this morning, lost the lead female to the hunt 2 years ago, and they had 10 pups this year and 2 females bred. Wham, what happened? That hadn't happened before, because the old lady held things together.
Wow.
And that's an anecdote. I know I'll be criticized for a data point of 1, but the dynamics of a pack living on a unit. And then the other thing that happens is you don't have the Molly's pack syndrome of a pack persisting for 28 years in one spot. And that's where we discover that wolf packs are matriarchies. It's these females who don't disperse, and the males who do, and they come in because they avoid inbreeding,
right.
But the females are holding this lineage together. Males come in from outside. When the male that was the breeder dies, you can't have a male step up because it'd be inbreeding. A male from outside comes in. But anyways, on a human-dominated landscape, the hunting, the human-caused mortality, not only breaks up the social fabric of the pack, it breaks up the stability of the packs on the landscape. So you have kind of a landscape, and people point to this all the time. Wolves are fine. Look at them. They're here. And that's true. But you have this configuration of packs where each year the families are having to adapt to the human-caused mortality, and that means shifts within the pack and shifts on the landscape. What I mean by our packs going extinct and new packs moving in. You don't get the Molly's effect. But it happens to other packs too. Look at Junction, 8 Mile. Cougar's been there since the early 2000s. That's when you don't have humans killing wolves all the time. And again, I can't be a purist. I can't be an idealist. I'm not arguing against wolf hunting.
We understand.
But let's understand it and then make decisions based on that. And so that was the purpose of this paper that we published this last winter, of what is the impact of human-caused mortality on pack sociality, you know? And it's different. Okay, and the criticism we got is anytime you criticize killing wolves, you're going to get cannon fodder at you. It's just, you can't no, we didn't criticize anything. We didn't criticize killing wolves. We didn't make policy suggestions. This is very important, because we had to deal with the gut shots all winter. What we did was say, this is what happens if you decide to do that. And that's a key point to this whole podcast that I hope comes through, is there was no value judgments in it. But don't you think it's better knowing than not knowing, okay? And then it's a human decision on what to do, but this is more data to have to decide what to do.
Wow.
And we had to take, the broadsides all winter about this, because, killing wolves is, you're going to get shot back at, without a doubt.
Wow, what an alternative reality if all packs did look like the Molly pack.
Oh, no, it's incredible what they taught us just by,
That's amazing. But my last question is, in the spirit of my first question is, I need a story. I need a campfire story, one that sits with you, one that you remember, one that feels, somewhat of a culmination of your time with all these guys.
Well, there's a few, and I've been doing some writing about this, but a park one is, there's a number of times, and these are the most valuable moments in life, and these are the moments when it allows you to carry on. But when you're out there, and they're the best when you're by yourself. But a wolf is in a position. You have a wolf encounter, and 90% of wolf encounters they take off. We've been mean to them their entire existence, and they run away. And a handful of times they have not. They stop, they see you, you pause, and I truly believe this. You send a vibe off your body. How you are. I mean, the three of us sitting here, we're all sending vibes, and you send a vibe of, it's cool. Do your thing. I'm just going to stand here, whatever. And it's almost like the wolf picks up on that and takes a couple steps towards you, and looks. And a quick story: I was in Wood Buffalo National Park last spring with Luke Carbon, who's a dear friend of mine, and he studied wolves there, and he studied wolves in Jasper and Banff and Riding Mountain in Canada. And we're there together, and in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., a pack of wolves come. This is just last year. Chases a herd of bison right through where I had my tent pitched. And, Lou's 81, and he's sleeping inside. And I'm like, I better wake Lou up. There was another woman sleeping in a tent, 10, 15 yards away. She was asleep. And I look out of the tent, and there's a pack of wolves running these bison through 50 yards away. And so I woke her up, threw her my binocs, but out of loyalty to my friend Lou, there's a cabin there. It's a Wood Buffalo National Park research station. I go in, he's in his underpants, standing at the window. I hook up a spine scope that was inside, and this wolf that was chasing the bison across this field, female, I've studied wolves for 44 years. I'm pretty good at guessing the sex from a distance, stops. And she's shed, and she's got some hair hanging. She was she was light colored, almost cream colored. And she just pulls away from the bison and walks across the middle of this meadow. And the woman who is now standing outside the tent, 3 a.m. in the morning, is now, and this is the first time in her life she's seen a wolf. This wolf is 25, 30 yards away. Lou and I are inside looking, mostly naked eye, but a little bit spine scope to get details of the wolf. And the wolf just stood there. And so this woman, her name is Erin McCluskey. She lives in Edmonton. She writes a little bit for a magazine called Nature Alberta. And she told me on my deathbed I'll remember that story. But the point is, why'd the wolf do that? They're hunted and trapped in Wood Buffalo. Aboriginal have rights there to hunt and trap and shoot wolves anytime they want. And this wolf broke off from a bison hunt, cut across out of its way, and stood and looked at her. And so that's, to me, and the Aboriginal voices we heard today, that's the power of nature, and uniquely, that's the power of wolves. So that wasn't the story I was going to tell. The story I was going to tell, really quick, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton visited the wolves in the pen. Yeah. And the pen had just had a tree fall on it. And wolf number 9's in the pen, and her pups had escaped. So we had set soft catch leg hold traps all around the pen to catch the pups unharmed and put them back in with her mama. And the frickin' president of the United States, sitting, not X, is coming to the frickin' pen that day. So I'm up at the pen. It would probably be a good idea to take out these leg hold traps when the president and the first lady are coming. Imagine. And I'm seeing, I saw Secret Service guys with, automatic rifles now starting to infiltrate the hills around me. And so I better get these freaking traps out of here. And I was doing that with one of these traps. And the fence is right in front of me. The traps were set outside the fence. And I was hard at work, head down. And I look up, and I don't know, a couple yards away through the chain link fence was wolf number 9, one of our most famous wolves in the entire history, Yellowstone Wolves, new wolf era is what I like to call it. And she had the whole pen to be in. It's an acre pen. And, she's as far as you guys are from me, really. But there was a pen between. I don't want to make it sound better than it was. And she's just looking at me. Again. And I have a couple more like this. I'm not going to tell them, I promise. I might write about them sometime. Why'd she do that? I mean, these are like 30-year thought processes I have. Why'd she do that? And so we looked into each other's eyes for a few moments, and then beautifully and quietly she slipped away. Just, whew. But I was, the whole other time I'm working, she's at the other side of the pen, nervously pacing on the back, doesn't like me. I knew her well. I went in the pen with her many times. She's staying away. Screw you. I don't like you. You're the whitey. Get out of here. And now I'm hard at work, and she came up either to investigate or say something. And I would be arrogant to know what, but I felt the power and I felt some kind of message. And man, guys, that stuff sticks with you. That's what, maybe Tyson or
Lance,
what I would call medicine man, or power or spirit animal, or if you are going to take the time out, like he said, to listen. I was trying to listen to Wolf number 9. I'm sure I garbled her message, but again, and it's happened a couple other times, don't worry, I'm not going to tell a story. Why did they do that? When we've been hunting and torturing them for centuries, arguably thousands of years, and they still have the capacity to give something like that. That's why all these people can fill a room like this, because wolves have that ability to affect you. And all I want to say is people who haven't had that experience, and I'm not saying it has to be with wolves, go out in the wilds and you can have it with a songbird. Yeah. I've had songbirds fly up closer to a branch and eye me out and then fly away. I listen to that kind of stuff. Anyway, sorry to get carried away.
Please,
Very much apologize for that.
No, never.
But those are, and the wood buffalo one was like...
That is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
And Erin said to the day she dies, her last breath will be thinking of that wolf walking up to her.
My goodness. I would be thinking about that too. The final thing that I want to ask you, and we've asked this close to 150 times.
Oh, no.
Is when you, Doug Smith, hear the word wolf, what does it mean to you?
Wildness. I heard Bob's answer. He kind of had the Jack London, and I did too. I did all that. But wolves are, I think I've said this before, they are not going to adapt to our ways, and they'll pay for it with their life. They're always going to be wolves. And wolves can live near the people. That's not wild. But they symbolize and represent, and I think they're the poster child of this is life separate from people. And they're a struggle for people to coexist with. So they're pure and they're wild, and that's something worth fighting for, because I think we're losing that. Our life is becoming about parking lot and plazas and consumerism and, vacations to beautiful places. And the message that wolves have is life separate from humanity, and it's not all about that stuff I just mentioned. I think they are that powerful of a message. All the wildness that, Jack London wrote about, and Robert Service, the poet of the North, that stuff is true and powerful. But I think, to me, wolves, in a way, are a challenge to humanity to change our ways.
That's the way to do it. Doug, we cannot thank you enough.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing time with us, and it's been an absolute pleasure following you and getting to speak with you and everything that you've done for Yellowstone, for wolves, for elk, for everything that lives inside this park.
Well, thanks. I have been wanting to speak to you guys for a while, but when I worked for the government, I had to get permission, and they probably wouldn't have given me permission, and now I don't need to get permission. So thank you for the opportunity. Being able to talk is always a great privilege.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
House y'all out there. We'll be with you next time.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. All right.
Bye. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.